Thanks for hopping on to talk about your show, Queen of the South.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
So before all that, congratulations on the 5th season of Queen of the South for yourself. Could you believe that it actually went on this long for yourself?
I mean, it's so, it's so hard to judge. I would have to say season one, the pickup going into season two may have been the most surprising because season one, in a way, was like, it felt really groundbreaking in a way that it was unusual. We weren't sure what the audience was going to think, but ultimately, the audience tuned in. They loved it. We got it. We went into season two, and the audiences continued to build. Thanks to Netflix, they discovered off season, and so it's surprising right now in the era of TV that we're in that anything will go 5 seasons. But I think the passion that the fans have for these characters, really, it's not surprising that it went this long. But of course, it's an adventure. It's,
Absolutely, and I do have to tell you that I did watch a few of the seasons and binge right through a lot of that storyline because it's to me it's captivating. But what do you think is the secret of success for Queen of the South that in your opinion?
I mean, in my opinion, it has to be the characters always. And really, for the character of Teresa to begin as, in a sense, I don't like to call her a victim, but she was a victim of circumstances, but she never considered herself a victim. To see her rise to power and also hold on to her moral code while she's in a world that's a world of violence and brutality. So she's always been very empathetic to the audience. We had a saying early in season one, part of the secret sauce was we're going to give her a decision to make, right? Two choices. One will be bad and one will be worse. And ultimately, that's what keeps the audience engaged in a way because they ask themselves, what would I do in that situation? And inevitably, she never takes the easy way out, but it's always the moral way. At least that's what she's tried to hold on to. And I think as a result of that, the audience really sympathizes with her and they go on the journey with her. And so I think that's really a big part of the success. And of course, Alicia Braga is amazing. She's incredible. She's not only the boss and the jefa in charge, but she brings a level of vulnerability to this role that I think is very appealing. And there's never a moment when you don't believe her. Her true north for Alicia is always truth. What's the truth of the moment? What's the truth of every word that comes out of my mouth, every pause, every inflection? So she fights for that. And she makes everything better. I mean, she's just incredible.
How do you keep up dedicating Teresa as a morally positive person in the world of criminals and corruption for 5 seasons? How do you keep that up? Because I don't know, to be as Teresa herself, I don't know if you could actually have that conscious, that vulnerability for so long.
Yeah, well, what you do is we've surrounded her now with a family, right? And so what happened was there was a transition. In the beginning, it was very much about how do I survive as a character. Then we surrounded her with a group of people who were loyal to her, but also sympathetic characters, right? And so then as she continued to rise in her journey, her goal became, how do I keep my family safe? And that's something that's universal, I think, to everyone in the audience, because we all have people that we love, whether they're blood relatives or friends. We all have a sense of there's a community around each one of us, and we care about these people and we want to keep them safe. And so when she's forced to make these decisions in her world, we understand those decisions because we also love the people that surround her, because now we're invested in her family as well. So I think that's a big part of it, you know. At the same time, we've gone a long way, at least in the last 2 seasons. Again, part of that transition of her just remaining or keeping herself safe. In the last 2 seasons, we've decided, how do we explore the root cause of gangsterism, cartels, right? And so what we wanted to do is we wanted to lift the hood on this type of crime and say what's underneath there. And you know, ultimately, it comes down to systemic corruption, you know, and inequality, and some of that is tied to racism. And so, moving to New Orleans, we were able to explore that, how systemic corruption and racism lends itself and creates an environment where people who are disempowered then ultimately find ways to empower themselves. And that oftentimes is through crime.
One of the things that's fascinating over the 5 seasons is that her journey that started in Mexico went into Texas, you know, then New Orleans, and then she's trying to expand into Miami, parts of Europe, and even New York. How did you basically make that story transition geographically? You know, what was this a long-term plan for yourselves?
You know, because it's a long character arc, we had to always go bigger, right? Like at a certain point, you're going like, okay, we're the biggest cartel in Mexico, but what's next to conquer? And there always has to be a goal, and there always has to be a motivation behind that goal. It can't, for Teresa Mendoza, it can't just be, I'm going to become the biggest, baddest cartel member in the world, right? So the transition to Miami, New York, Europe, all had a motivation behind that, and that was to gain a large amount of money so that she could buy property. And ultimately, as we set up in season 4, her goal is to go legit, right? She wants to be like the Kennedys. And ultimately, that's where she feels that the protection will come. She has a too big to fail mentality, right? I can become so big and so powerful that ultimately I become untouchable. And so what that does is, from a story perspective, it always forces us to find new territory that she can expand into, but then B, continue to weave this thread of motivation of why that territory and why now. And so that's part of the challenge. And you know, ultimately, that's kind of what they pay the writers for, to like come up with that secret sauce and the motivation so that the audience buys into it and goes on the journey with her.
I'm actually fascinated for you, you know, show running this show, because the fact is, by watching Queen of the South, there is so many things, so many small plot lines that go on with Teresa, because every decision she makes, it seems like it causes a new problem, or another problem actually comes along. How do you and the writers in the room come up with so many different subplots for Queen of the South? Because I don't think I could even come up with that imagination over the course of 5 seasons.
Yeah, well, you know, that's why it takes a team, you know, and that's one of the beautiful things about television writing is, you know, as a showrunner, myself, Dalen Rodriguez, my co-showrunner, we get together early before the season actually starts, and we plot out what are the things that we want to explore thematically, because the plot for us, I mean, you know, it's always subservient to the theme and the dramatic question, right? Which is, what are the dramatic questions? What are the themes? And so once we figure that out, like for example, last season, it was heavy as the head that wears the crown. So instead of having her go up against these big, powerful cartels, ultimately the challenge that she faced was from within, right? And she was forced to make very difficult decisions that essentially only the boss can make. And they also, those decisions challenged her moral code, right? So if we say, heavy is the head that wears the crown, let's say for season 4, and then we say, okay, so how do we explore that within story? And so we know that the problem is the major problems that unfold will come from within. We'll create an exterior force, but ultimately we want it to be, how difficult is it to be the queen, right? And to be the boss. And so once we lay that out and we say, well, what's the most challenging decision that Teresa Mendoza would ever have to make? So that's the question that we start with. And ultimately that comes down to, okay, this is the woman with the heart of gold. This is the woman who for 4 seasons, we've watched her risk her own life to protect and save the lives of even strangers. So what would be the most difficult decision she could make? Ultimately, that would be handing over someone from her family to death. And so we knew that's where we were going to go, because that would be the most difficult decision that the boss would have to make, and particularly for Teresa Mendoza. And so what are the circumstances that will lead to that? And ultimately, we set it up in the first episode of season 4, which is, this isn't Mexico. We'll keep a low profile, no murders, right? And very quickly in episode 3, we know that Javier is going to lose control, murder not only someone in New Orleans, but the nephew of the judge. And then the blowback from that, as he would begin to try to cover his tracks, would just gain momentum and till we go further and further, till ultimately we get to the place where her back is against the wall and she's forced to make the most difficult decision that she could make, and ultimately prove the hypothesis, right? Which is heavy as the hair that wears the crown. And so that's essentially how we set up the framework. And then all the details of that, the subplots that come in, they all are subservient to that. These storylines of Pote, of Kellyanne, all of those, again, are reflecting the same theme over and over again. And that's how it all ties together. And so that's part of the secret ingredient or the magic that goes in behind the scenes. And then again, the team comes together and we spend weeks brainstorming, coming up with what is the best way to show this, what are the greatest stories that we can tell. And we land in those places, and then we lay the tent poles down throughout the season, and then we start filling it in.
One of my guilty pleasures about this show, well, I don't know if it's a guilty pleasure. Sometimes I will have to admit I hate you for it. It's because you're unapologetic about killing off certain characters once we fall in love with them. I don't know how you pull it off. Sometimes I just want to like stop binging after you kill off some of these characters I grew to love. But for yourself, do you have a favorite character that you killed off that you kind of regret and you wish you could bring them back?
I mean, ultimately, I think maybe the hardest character for us was probably Javier. And I think it's because he wasn't just a soldier for Teresa, but we went home with him, right? We got to meet the love of his life. We also knew that he was fleeing the violence of Mexico. He didn't want to work for his cousin Boaz. So he was one of the people that, like Teresa, is somebody that was reaching for redemption. And as a result of that, I think the audience really fell in love with him. And there's this great moment in season 4 where he's sitting with Teresa once she finds out that he's hiding this woman, Amelia, who's the love of his life. And they have this moment. And he says, do you think, who are we to expect that we can have this thing, this normal life, this, somebody that we love and keep them safe, and it's just like, it was so poignant, that moment. And he says, do you think that we could ever have this? And she says, no. And it's like your heart just breaks, because in that moment you realize, these people just want what we all want, right? Which is safety, some level of comfort, and we want to have somebody that we love and loves us in return. And so to be able to see that with him, and to see him kind of really struggling with what he did, and knowing that he's just digging himself deeper into the hole. That was really, it was powerful and it was heartbreaking. So that was very difficult. And of course, Brenda was really difficult because, what a great, she was the best friend, but she brought so much fun and levity to the show. And so that was a very difficult decision to make. And so, yeah, it's difficult, but here's the thing that we've always said about this show. If people if characters that we love never die, then what we're doing is not true, right? There's no truth in it. In order for us to believe the stakes in every episode, we have to have experienced the loss of these beloved characters. And as a result of that, it means people in our world have to die, because that's what happens in this world.
Boy, that's almost like now you're going to give us a guessing game on whether Teresa's going to last until the end of season 5.
This is, yeah, I mean, I can't, it's hard to discuss because, of course you don't want to give any spoilers, but, this is the final season, and so we're racing towards a conclusion. And, all I can say is, what happens, no one will have guessed. And, yeah, that's all I can say.
Well, could you at least there's a few things, because the season has already started, but there's a few things that you already brought up. It's one was a pregnancy. Right. Why did you want to go in that direction? Because obviously people's going to talk about is who would bring a child into that type of world.
Well, I mean, you just nailed it on the head, right? Like, coming out of season 4, we've done something. Well, I'm going to start with Pote, right? This is the character that was present in the pilot when Teresa Mendoza was literally raped, right? Now, 4 seasons later, he's become her closest confidant, right? And so we've redeemed that character. Last season, he became like a father to Tony, and he really mourned his loss. And so what will happen to Pote if he knew that he was bringing a child into this world? How would that change him? How would that affect his priorities? Because up until this moment, right, his main priority has always been to Teresa. So what happens when he falls in love with Kellyanne, right? And then let's one up that. What happens if now they're expecting a child? So now we're creating a conflict, right? Is his loyalty with his family, or is it to Teresa? So those are some of the questions that we're raising. And also, how does it affect Teresa? Like, the entire cartel, the entire family is now affected with this knowledge, right? That there's this innocent child coming into the world. So, I think it was really about that. It was really about, like, asking those difficult questions, right? And also, for Teresa, how much is too much, and when do you pull that golden parachute and just get out, right? And that baby coming into the world feels like it would be that time. And so we get into that. Last night's episode, we got into a little bit of that, where Kellyanne literally asks, we have more than enough money in offshore accounts. We can just get out. Let's just get out. And for Teresa, it's difficult, because what we start revealing this season is, although she has approached this life in the sense of, I'm doing this to protect myself and my family, there's something deeper that even she doesn't realize, which is, when you grow up hungry, you're always worried about the next meal. And so it's almost like there's never enough. And so that's one of the things that we're exploring, because now, going into the final season, and everybody knows how the pilot starts, what is Teresa Mendoza's fatal flaw? So that child coming into this world is one of the questions that brings us up and helps to kind of, like, put a lens on that.
Excellent. And one more thing, a lot of people will be asking is, will this show come full circle back to Mexico? I mean, usually a lot of storylines do that, but are you going to do that? Yeah, it's tough to say.
You know what? I'll say this in terms of Mexico. In order for us to close the series in a way that I think is fulfilling, we have to tie up some loose ends. You know what I mean? And that means that there will be Mexico will come back into play. I cannot say how, but it will. And this is a part of storytelling, and what we're trying to do, and how we're trying to elevate this particular series, and the way we're trying to bookend it. the pilot introduces Teresa Mendoza's character, and in the opening monologue, she says, "I'll be dead in 30 seconds." And then we see a bullet take her out, right? So ultimately, we know kind of where the series goes. Like, it was kind of set up. We kind of know what comes next. The question is, what are the circumstances surrounding that, right? And all of those things are what we're exploring, and where we go and how we get there, and what the fallout is, and all of that stuff. And even in that, no one's going to see where we're going.
I love it. I love it. I can't wait to finally watch, the last episode to the conclusion. But before I let you go, Benjamin, we know that this is the last season for you in the journey with Queen of the South. What's next for you as a writer?
That's a really good question. Right now, I have a project that we're shopping right now. It's called Blood Aces. It's based on a book, and it follows the character of Benny Binion. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He created the World Series of Poker, and he arrived in Vegas in the early 40s, and he opened the Horseshoe Casino, and he was really one of the founding fathers of modern day Vegas. But before he arrived in Vegas, he was essentially the Al Capone of Texas. He was a cowboy gangster. And so essentially it tells the story of the birth of Vegas, the origin story of Vegas, but through the eyes of this Texas gangster who arrived with, this guy drove across country. He was fleeing the Texas Rangers, and he drove in the middle of the night in his Cadillac with his wife, his 5 kids, $2 million in the trunk, 2 Tommy guns. And the driver was his number 2 bodyguard, who was a 6'6" black cowboy named Gold Dollar. And that's how they arrived in Vegas, with $2 million in the trunk, 2 Tommy guns, and a car full of kids. And he started over, and he lived into his 80s. And he took on the mob. He took on the FBI. The president of the United States was after him, and they put him in prison for a couple of years. But this guy outgunned, outsmarted, and outlived them all. And to this day, people know the World Series of Poker, and tens of thousands of people compete now annually, and everybody who plays poker knows about the World Series of Poker. And it was created by this guy Benny Binion, who literally, he had a 2nd-degree education, and he this guy, he's an incredible character. And so we have that project. We're shopping it around. There's a few other things that we're looking at, and just excited. I'm also directing. I directed this season, and my episode is actually representing the series in the Emmys this year, and so that's really exciting. So now I'm looking to branch off into that. So lots to be excited about, and we'll see. But I promise I'll come back, and we'll have another conversation when I land on the next thing.
That's excellent, because you already piqued my interest, and I'm ready to binge your show that you haven't even made yet.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
Well, excellent. Well, keep me in mind to speak about your future work again. Thanks a lot for this conversation, Benjamin.
No, thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Hey, thank you. Bye now.
Bye. Thanks, Gig.
Thank you.
Gig, we should set up another chat when the finale airs, so you guys can talk about everything.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Awesome. Talk later. Bye.
Bye.